Well, hello, educator friends, and I hope you are having a great day wherever you are, whatever you may be doing. Welcome back to another great episode of the School Life series. I have just been blown away by the feedback and the positive comments that we have received during this season. And I want to thank everybody that has been listening, has been sharing, and talking about the School Life series. So, we're going to continue to bring the best of the best educators from all around the country on as guests. We're going to talk about hot topics. We're going to talk about topics that you want to hear, that you need to hear, that you are saying, help, I need some insight on this. That's what this is all about, to support educators all across the country. And when I say great educators, here we are. We got another one today. So I have had the privilege of knowing Chuck for about a year now. We presented at the same conference last March. And Chuck is just one of those guys that I followed on social media before meeting him. And then I got to meet him in person. And it's like, yep, that's who he is. Who he is on social media is who he is on person, who he is at school, who he is outside of school. And that is just a genuinely great human being. Chuck is always positive. Chuck is always looking to build others up, to bring out the best in others. And I just really admire about that. So Chuck is a elementary AP currently
hmm
in Virginia. He's going to share a little bit more about his education journey, but currently he's an elementary AP in Virginia. And Chuck, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for coming on today.
Well, I feel like after the introduction, we should probably wrap it up
That's
because
it.
I'm not sure I can live up to the promises there. But I know I'm glad to be here, and thanks for asking me. I really appreciate it, and I love the opportunity to just kind of get to talk. And I feel like the best podcasts become conversations, and I'm looking forward to ours.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Chuck is going to share his social media stuff at the end of the episode, but he shares a lot of content. He's always talking and he's always just looking to lift others up. And like I said, he's one that you're going to want to follow and want to follow his journey and just follow what he has to share. So let's dive into it, Chuck. Let's get started.
All right.
First, we're going to talk about you, who you are as a person. So personal life first. Just tell us a little bit about who you are.
I'm a father, husband, fisherman,
Okay.
and I love social media. I probably overshare, but I believe in the power of telling your own story, controlling your narrative, and I always believed in that. And social media as a platform, for a long time in education, it was kind of the third rail.
Yeah.
People didn't want to touch it, but we really discovered with Eric Schenniger and Josie Filippo, some other folks, the real power that comes from what you're doing. And I got people like Andrew Gribble, who is really making sure that people are just using that leverage to tell their school story. And I really believe in the power of that because I've been doing this for 29 years. And if you don't tell your story, someone's going to tell it for you. When someone says, we reached out for a comment, but no one, you draw your own conclusions. So I want to try to
Exactly.
be as transparent as I can, just sharing what I believe. And I'm also a believer in motivation, and just, reminding people that the things they do are for other people. Every interaction we have throughout the day is you can either make somebody's day or break somebody's day. And I want you to be a day maker, and I want you to embrace your awesomeness. Don't be afraid to be
Yeah.
awesome. I talk about that a lot. And
Yes.
just that idea of, if you don't know what's awesome about yourself and you don't embrace it, then will you know what to share? And so that's just, and I kind of got a little bit off topic there. You see my passion. My passion is
Yeah.
really about,
Others.
sharing with others and
Yeah.
motivating
Yeah.
others. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's something I think we connect well on is because it's never about you or never about me. We may be talking a lot and sharing a lot, but even if it's us, it's never about us. It's always about others and what we can do for others. And you say awesome, I say great. It's the same thing. Everybody has it inside them, right? And it's all about getting it out and sharing it with the
Right.
world because everybody has that greatness or that awesomeness inside them. So thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that, Chuck. Let's dive into your journey as an educator. So 29 years, you started in education when you were 10. And now you're here. I was to say that, but
My wife will love that.
yeah, but where'd you start? Where have you been along this journey for 29 years?
Well, back in 1994, the December of 94, I graduated from Longwood College with a degree in education. And back in those days, December graduates in education were not a good thing. And so I ended up working at a daycare center with 5-year-olds for about 6 months or so. And then I was brought on board in Louisa County and was there for 17 years. And I taught middle school. I love middle school. People think I'm crazy, but I love middle
Yeah,
school.
I'm with you there.
It's kind of like middle school is you got to love kids when they're at their least lovable. There's no light at either end of the tunnel. They're kind of in the bend, and so the light comes from you.
Yes.
And I taught sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade. I taught fourth grade for a year, and then back to the middle school and loved that. Then went into administration for about 5 years as an AP at the elementary and middle level, and and then went back in the classroom because there was kind of a turning point. We were given a lot of educational technology to a lot of people, and I realized I didn't know how to evaluate whether or not they were using it the right way or talk to them about how to use it. So I went back in the classroom for a couple of years, and it was really pivotal for me because it reminded me of a couple of things. Number one, don't give me a memo that says you must have it by February, and then I discover it on my desk in May and no one's asked me for it. The importance of things like that, but also just the difference between technology as a teaching tool and technology as just kind of glitz and glam. And so those 2 years were pivotal. That I wound up down here in Dinwiddie County, was an elementary AP, then a principal of an elementary school, then principal of the middle school. Then I went to the school board office as a director in a grant position. And when the grant ended, the only position available was back as an AP at the elementary level. So I went ahead and took that because I wanted to stay here in
Yeah.
Dinwiddie County. I'm the PA announcer for our football team. My wife and I made our home here, and I wanted to remain in this area.
Very cool. Yeah, and not surprised you're the PA announcer. When I think of these public speakers and people that are well spoken, you're at the top of that list.
Thank you.
You shared, I mean, all of those positions. I think that's so cool that you can say, I was everywhere, and I think it probably allows you to have such a unique perspective because you've been in so many different positions, right? You can say, when I was there, this is how I felt, and going
Right.
back to the classroom as from an administrator back into the classroom, I bet that was so unique and interesting just because you've got a whole new perspective, not only on of what the teacher's going through, but what the administrator's going through from a teacher
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, and so very
Well,
neat that
and,
you can
and
have those.
just kind of having that understanding that decisions were not all arbitrary. That's what I've learned as I've gone through different positions, is that everything that I thought was arbitrary was actually really grappled with at some level. They just might not have asked me at the moment, but
Yeah.
somebody somewhere was thinking about it. And I didn't mention that I was the administrator of a virtual school and of the alternative center
Well,
here in Dinwiddie County. So I really got some unique perspective there as well, because, the kids who were self motivated and those were kids who
mhm.
thrived in the virtual environment. And then the kids who we had to really play tug of war to get them across that finish line for their
Yeah.
diploma. But, so it was great to really get to see both ends of that
Mhm.
spectrum, because, that diploma kind of levels the playing field as far as what the opportunities are next.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got to get into that finish line, like you said, one way or the other. And I think that's really great when you have school districts and school systems that are leveraging what the tools that they have and saying, we're going to meet the individual student where they're at to make sure that they get to that finish line. Instead of just giving up on them and saying, sorry, you don't fit in this box. You're going to
Right.
struggle or you're not going to work at the school. We're going to use what we have and make sure you get there. And not only do you get there, but when you cross the finish line, you're ready to take on the world,
Right.
because
Yep.
that's another topic we could get into on another day. So you already mentioned a couple of just absolute educational rock stars who have influenced you in the social media kind of content world, but and it may be these guys again. But my next question is, who has influenced you throughout your life? This could be personally, professionally, either or, you name it.
Right. Well, you know, my fifth grade teacher, Mr. White, is the reason I became a teacher. And I wanted to be what he was. And what he was basically the guy everybody wanted.
Yeah,
It was a K through 6 school, but everybody looked forward to fifth grade and everybody wanted Mr. White. And I wanted to be that guy.
powerful.
Then Weldon Bradshaw was my principal when I was in eighth grade, and he's the reason I made it through eighth grade. And he's the reason I wanted to become an administrator. Years down the road in my career, I was just kind of like, "What's next?" And I thought
Yeah.
about him. And the funny thing is, I mentioned being the football announcer. We made it to the playoffs, and he is now retired, but he is covering football games for the local paper. And
Okay.
so a couple of years ago, we were in the state. We won the states, and he was there covering it. And he had dropped his credentials. And I just picked him up to give back, and it said Weldon Bradshaw on the credentials. And I looked at him and said, "Mr. Bradshaw?" And it's funny because, like, every decade or so, we reconnect
Yeah.
through something. It was just really neat to get to talk to him. And then he came down here to Dinwiddie to cover a game this season. And it was great to get to kind of show him where I was
Yeah.
and what I was doing and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And, it's just moments like
Seriously.
that.
That's
And,
something
and,
I
and, and
recently have just tried to share so much about is like, it is easy to say as educators, like we make a difference and we make an impact. Yeah, we do, right? When you hear stories like that, like
yeah,
somebody that played a pivotal role in a really key spot in your life, not only got you through eighth grade, but then motivated you to take an entire career path. And and all these years later, every time you see him, he's going to look at you and say, Chuck, right? I mean,
right.
it's like there's so many stories like that all across this country over and over again that educators that you just don't have for a year in the classroom, or you just don't have a principal for 4 years, you have them for life, you know? And you get to catch up once every decade. And he sits there and he listens to
Yeah,
every word that you say. And he wants to know what you're doing. He wants to know what's going on, and he's proud of you for what you're doing. And how many students did he have over the years? But in that
right.
moment, he made sure that you feel like you're the most important. It's just
Absolutely. He
incredible.
he uh, he always did. And I think about that. So many people have influenced me since I've gotten into this
Hmm.
career. Jimmy Costas and Don Epps out in Kansas.
Yeah.
Michelle Childress owns our house. She's up in New York, and she's doing work not only as a superintendent but also with her local NAACP. She's in a leadership position there. Just to kind of see the things that other people are doing and that awesomeness that they bring
Yeah.
out. And here
That's
in
it.
Virginia, they're just that people don't necessarily think about Virginia as kind of leading the charge, but we have some fantastic leaders right here in
Hmm.
this state. And I'm a member of the VAESP, and I'm a member of their board as an AP rep now, and I just the folks that are involved in that, they inspire me every day. And so there's just I could go on forever.
Literally.
Principal Cafale.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Oh,
just
yeah.
there's no
I just
end.
got to see him again a couple weeks ago in Houston. And he's just one of those guys. You're just around him. You can just feel, his influence as soon as he steps into a room. Everybody's eyes are on him. They're hanging on
Yeah.
every word he says. And the guy not only talks the talk, but he's walked the walk. He's lived
No,
it. Right?
100%.
It's just awesome to have so many people like that. And I think you can probably relate to this, but I think for the longest time for me, I was in my classroom. Even when I became principal, my first couple of years, I was in my school, like it's just kind of a bubble. And then social media just completely opened up the world, right? And all of a sudden, I
Mm-hmm.
realized I wasn't the only one going through this. I wasn't the only one that was in this position. There's so many other people that are right there, and not only are they going through it, but they want to support you too. And
Right.
so
Right.
you mentioned so many people, it's all across the country that are there to support you in whatever role, whatever you're going through. And so it's so powerful. If people are listening, and they probably are if they're listening to this podcast, but if they aren't connected to educators across the country, do so now. Get
100%.
involved, because it just not only does it open your eyes, but it provides you just a whole other blanket of support that you never could even dreamed of.
Yeah, and there is no reason anymore for anybody to operate on an island.
Yeah.
One thing I did, I had a Spanish teacher at the middle school, and that was it. She was the only person in her department at our school, and so I connected her with, some people who are on social media that I met through social media. I said, "This is who you need to talk to," because she was new,
Yeah.
and in a very powerful moment, I actually had a picture of her when I had Jonathan Alsheimer come and do a keynote for our
Oh,
staff,
cool.
and so like her third day of being a teacher, she's sitting there getting to have a one-on-one with him. It's just kind of like, that's what it's all about. And being able to
That
make those
is, yeah.
connections is huge.
Yeah. How many people have you met like Jonathan? I mentioned it to you in the introduction. You meet him, you follow him on social media, and you just think like they're this superstar. And then you meet and you sit down and have a conversation together, have a drink together. Like, they're humans and they want to help you. It's awesome. So,
Well, the first time I was on the VIA ESP board, Hamish Brewer was on there as
yeah,
well.
you talk about a rock
And
star. Yeah.
and he's 100% the way he is. You talk about somebody who is how he is, that is
Yeah.
him. And the whole time we were there, I was talking about my wife and how cool my wife. And so we went somewhere. We were getting ready to have dinner, and she joined us. And he stood up in the middle of the restaurant and he said, "Thank God you're here because you're all he talks about." And I was just kind of like, "That's cool."
Yeah.
I mean, because
Chuck's
that's what
marriage
I
has
would.
not been the same since.
Right, exactly, right. And I mean, and that's what I would do with somebody that I went to college with.
Yeah.
And he and I had known each other for a matter of hours, and he was all in. And he still sends me texts and checks on me. Sees how I'm doing. He's a fantastic
That's
guy.
it. Yeah.
And like you said, that you see these people and you think they're kind of untouchable, and
Yeah.
then you get to meet them, and not only are they willing for you to talk to, they want you to reach out to them.
Yeah, they really do. And then it's so rewarding when you have people reach out to you, right?
Yeah,
And you're in this position, you're like, wow, obviously I'm no Hamish Brewer, but somebody wants my advice. Or you see somebody and says, I watched that one episode or I saw that one post and it really transformed how I looked at the rest of that year or something. The impact is just unbelievable. So
yeah,
let's get going. Let's get through another question.
sure.
My next question for you is what was or has been just a total game changer or a hack for your school life? Something that you can say, I started implementing this and it just totally transformed my
And I'm
abilities.
going to thank retired Principal Mark French for introducing me to this.
Yeah.
The good news call of the day.
Yes.
And it is one of the most powerful things that I get to do in the school. And right now I'm in charge of testing and we're getting ready for our winter growth assessments. And so I'm not getting to do it the way I want to be doing it right now. But that good news call of the day, when you can call a parent and you can say, "Hey, this is something your kid did." I'm not going to call
Mhm.
you and tell you your kid's fantastic because you know your kid's fantastic. At least you believe that the kid you send to school is going to be fantastic bell to bell.
Yeah.
But like the other day, we had a young lady who helped a student in the fifth grader who helped a student in the cafeteria, a kindergartner, who had too much on his tray at breakfast, and he just had nowhere to start. And so she kind of went through with him and said, "Do you like this? Do you like this? Do you want to save this for later?" Opened his milk for him, did all that, made the good news call today. And the mom said, "I've never had the school call me for a good reason." Okay. You know what? And so what that did was that
Yeah.
allowed me to have a new kind of connection with her, but also I took away her power to say the school only calls for bad stuff.
Yes.
She can never say that again because that was a call to say, "Hey, I really appreciate what your kid did." And not
Yep.
just because of your kid, but because they made somebody else's life better today.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. Yeah, if you're not implementing the good news call of the day, do it now because it talk about sharing your story. Call, one phone call at a time. You are sharing your story, and we
Right.
mentioned it earlier. Every kid has awesomeness, has greatness inside them. Every kid in your school has something you can call home about and share the good
Right.
news with. It's there. You may
And
have to look a little harder
right.
for others, but it's there.
Well, it's funny because I did that for a kid who was in seventh grade. And years later, he was trying to get his GED so he could get. But I made a good news call today because he got a passing score by one question on the state assessment. So I
Big
made a good
deal.
news
Yeah,
call. Yeah, and
that's
so,
great.
but he years later, as a junior in high school, trying to get a GED, and the person said, "You haven't passed any SOL tests." He goes, "I did two. I passed my seventh grade reading SOL, and Mr. Moss called my mom to tell her." So I was like, you know
He'll
what?
never forget it for the rest of his
Yeah,
life, and
you know,
neither will Mama.
yeah.
His parents will
And
always remember
he's
that.
one of those kids. Every school's got those kids who you have code names for him on the radio, because that was him. But in that moment, he did something fantastic that honestly few people expected him to do.
Hmm.
and he needed to
Yep.
be celebrated for that. And also, it took away that power to say they only call me to tell me bad stuff.
Yeah. Come pick him up. I get it. Well, that's great. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Every kid absolutely should be celebrated at some point in their educational career. So today's topic, let's get to it. Let's get into it. Today's topic is bringing out the best in others so they can bring out the best in kids. When you sent me that topic, I was just like, yes, my heart started beating a little faster. Love it. And it definitely is you is who you are as an educator and as a person. So Chuck, when I say those words, what immediately comes to your mind?
Well, I think about things like the Good News Call today and empowering teachers to do that on their own. You don't just have to wait for me if something great is happening there. And
Mhm.
we're in the middle of implementing the Virginia Literacy Act, which
Okay.
is taking an awful lot of bandwidth from the teachers. But just being able to remind them, you wouldn't be doing this if you didn't have a heart for what you were doing. So how do we take all these new expectations and all these new things on our plate and still make sure that we keep at the forefront wanting our kids to know we care about them and love them, because if they know we care about them and we know we love them, then they're more likely to learn from us. And I want us to cause learning. I don't want us to teach. I want us to cause learning,
Well, that's good.
because I can tell you what, Ray Herbeck tried to teach me piano, but he caused no learning,
Yeah.
but not because he didn't try, but
Yeah.
because we just never connected, the way that we should have. So I want teachers to make those kind of connections, have those meaningful relationships. And I tell people that the difference between a meaningful relationship and just a relationship is when you say to a kid, what are you doing this weekend? And they say they got a football game, whatever. And then Monday you say, hey, how was your football game? Because at that moment, that kid's like, wow, this weekend they thought about me. They remember they didn't, and things like
Yeah.
that. That's
Mr. Moss
how,
cared enough
right.
to ask me if I won or lost, how I played, that whatever it may be. Absolutely. That's where their brain goes is
Right.
they care about me.
And when they know that you care, they perform better for you,
Hmm.
or at the very least, they try. And that's all we can ask for. When I was a football coach, that was it. Just, from whistle to whistle, did you leave everything here? Did you do your best? Did you try your hardest every time?
Yeah.
If the kid cares about you, that's great. But if they know you care about them, that's everything.
Yep, that's it. And then that kind of leads into my next question. So we're going to go to the end. So our end goal, and you say, we're in the kid business, no doubt about that. But what does the best in kids look like to you?
It looks like they make even the smallest accomplishment as something that's celebrated, so they know it's important to move forward. And right now in our profession, they're talking about whether or not growth is going to keep on mattering and how things like that. But growth is everything.
Yeah.
So the way we bring out the best in kids is say, hey, so proud of you for making this accomplishment. So proud of you because you did your very best. And I think about a story Rita Pearson told, where she put on the kids' test plus 10 instead of minus 9, and the kid was like, I
Yeah.
only got one right. She goes, yep, but you got 10 points. And it completely shifted the
The
paradigm.
mindset. Yep.
Yeah. And that's what we have to do as teachers, and we're trying to do that with parents too, and just say that grades are not about evaluating your genetic output. Grades are about telling us where do we need to provide additional support, what do we need to do, to help our kids be successful, to bring out the best in them. And so again, those paradigm shifts, just changing from a deficit mindset to an investment mindset, really,
Yeah. Yeah.
because just
Absolutely.
celebrating that growth, even the smallest moment of growth, celebrating it, because again, then they'll know that's important to you and that you're willing to go the extra mile for.
Well, and yeah, that were very well said. And I think understanding that growth comes in a lot of different areas. My wife is an educator, I'm an educator, and we are the first to tell you that we don't prioritize grades in our household. We want our kids to go to school and be the kind kid first,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so celebrating those kindness acts of kindness, those moments where they're helping each other. Moments, our oldest daughter, she has struggled with anxiety in her younger years, and she's overcome that now that she's in upper elementary. And we make it a really big deal in our
Right.
household because of how far she's grown, right? Her grades have stayed the same over the years. She's grown in a whole lot of other areas, and we make it a very, very big deal. So just understanding that part, that growth comes in with a lot of different areas and it needs to be celebrated everywhere we go.
Well, and I remember I had a teacher who was struggling with the fact that her kids were not performing the way that the state expected them to, or anything like that. And I finally just looked at her. This was when I was at the middle school. I said, "Is there anything that that kid can do now that they couldn't do when they met you 180 days ago?" And the answer was yes. Okay, they're better because you were part of their life.
You did your job, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
good.
I mean, did they clear
So
every hurdle? Maybe not, but they got to that finish line.
I got there. Absolutely. So we're going to kind of continue to work our way back. But what are a couple ways that you think we, as an entire education system, can improve tomorrow's generation of leaders? We talked about celebrating the growth. We talked about those things. But what are a couple like just real practical strategies that you think that we can improve tomorrow's generation? Because they're the ones that are going to be leading us tomorrow.
Honestly, got to just kind of focus on one, and that is to build into our kids the ability to practice, feel, employ empathy.
Mm, good.
Because we live in a society that is, you can scroll TikTok for 4 hours and never talk to a single person.
Yeah.
But when you pass somebody in the hallway who's got their head down and they're walking, they're what you're making in 3 steps, they're making in 12. Like what? Like you got to stop and say, "Hey, you okay? What's going
Yeah.
on?" And I think until we're willing to invest in each other that way, I mean, we can make all the kind of headway we want to with technology and all those different things. And, because technology right now, everything that we're ever going to come up with is about making life easier for ourselves.
Yeah.
We've got all our necessities. Everything is about making life easier. But this morning in my message, I talked about the importance of being willing to be stopped in your tracks. And I think that is what empathy so often is. Are you willing to be stopped in your tracks because someone needs your 100% focus?
Mm,
And when you're giving them that focus, are you really just thinking about what's next? Or are you thinking about them? And are you listening to hear rather than to respond? Because not
yeah.
everybody needs a solution. Sometimes they just need a shoulder, and you got to be that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And you hit on it right there too. And that's one thing I talk about a lot about is listening, genuine listening. And that comes with empathy, hand in hand, but just listening to them. What do you need? How can I help you? How can I support you? Genuinely, instead of just saying, yep, see ya, and moving right on. And one word, one in this ear and out the other, and you're on to the next thing. Stop and truly in your tracks. Like you said this morning. I love
Well,
that.
and my computer, I'm facing you, and that's where my computer is on my desk. My door is over here. So I have to turn this way, turn away from my computer to talk to people because
By
what I
design,
don't want
that's
to do is,
intentional, right?
yeah, and because if they see me typing away or I might say to them, "Hold on a second, let me finish this email real quick," but
Hmm.
they will not see me swivel away from them to get back
Yep.
to something else. That
Yeah.
that's just not what I want to do.
That's a strategy right there, Chuck, because I think we've all sat with a superior or a boss or whatever you want to call it before who didn't design their office like that. And they're sitting there typing away, nodding their head. And you know for a fact they're not listening to what you're saying because they're consumed in whatever the screen is, but you're right there behind their screen and they're going away. So kudos to you for designing your office that way and making that a priority. All right, let's take a step back now. Let's get really into this topic of supporting others, bringing out the best in others. And so, obviously, it's a huge passion of yours. Why is this so important?
For me, it's important because of the people who did that for me in my life, whether it be my mom or my dad or Mr. Bradshaw that I was talking about or Mr. White. I can't tell you a thing I learned in fifth grade specifically. Like if you said, "What was your fifth grade curriculum?" I don't know, but I know he cared about me. And I know that he was the first person that trusted me to have my own mailbox and keep up with my own work and all those things. And I knew they made fun bets with the class about whether or not Washington or Dallas was going to win, and then if you chose the right side, you got ice cream or what. I remember those things, and that's why it's so important to me, because I just feel like that the way to get that best is to provide your best. Like, and don't get me wrong, everybody has 80% days. I get it. I
Yep.
100% get it.
It's life.
But when you look back on your career, was it mostly 80% days, or was it mostly 95 to 100% days? Those are the times when you just, again, you stopped in your tracks, and you're just kind of like, huh, this kid really needs me. Or as an administrator, this teacher really needs something right now, or this parent really needs something right now. And just being willing to have the conversations that aren't necessarily about curriculum, but they're just about, this is how I'm feeling today. This
Yeah.
is what's going on in my life. And, I just, I talked to a teacher this morning who happened to, on her Snapchat feed, has some pictures of her feeding a raccoon. I'm like, well, there's a story here. About a year ago, a baby raccoon was in her driveway. It was not well, and she nursed it back to health and released it back into the wild. But it still comes back to her every now and then for a head
Yeah.
scratch or whatever. And it's just kind of like that conversation had nothing to do with the second grade curriculum, how our kids were doing on the gifted screening or anything like that. But it had everything to do with, hey, you told me something about yourself. I really like that. So tell me more, fill me in. And again, it's just the people who did that for me inspired me to want to do it for other people, because I knew how it made me feel. What I didn't know was it was also making them feel good. But I knew that in that moment, I was cared about.
Yeah, absolutely. You bet. Two things. Also, how about this? I'm going to leave with my practical strategies, and then I'm going to let you share a few practical strategies. A couple of my practical strategies with this are whenever I was having a rough day as a principal, and you know what days I'm talking about, right? And I just, I'd had enough of whatever it was. The first thing I would do is just go and get to the hallways, right? And get
Yep,
to the classrooms,
100%.
because that filled my bucket, right? At the same time, I was connecting and building others up, but it is what I needed in that moment. That's my strategy number one. Number two, as a principal, I can't say this enough. Get into as many classrooms, if, depending on your size, if not every single classroom, every day, whether it just be for 10 seconds to say hello. How are you doing? Right? How's your kids that were sick last week? Right? How's the
Yeah.
move into the new house? Ask a question that has nothing to do with education or the classroom or standards or observations or anything, and just connect with the people that you serve. So those are my two strategies. Chuck, my question for you is, what are some real practical strategies you can give to our listeners that leaders, teachers, anybody can do for those they serve that's going to do this?
Right. Well, a couple of things for me. One thing's that, because when I get here in the morning, there's a ton of email and whatnot, and I try to stay away from it, but it's hard to do. But when we do parent drop off, I'm out there greeting the kids, and I always try to say, I like your shoes, I like your hoodie, that's a good
Yep.
looking hat. That it's something. Or if I know they were absent the day before, I'm like, glad to see you back, things like that. But nothing about, what are you going to do today? What are you going to learn today? That's not how I want to start the morning. I want to start the
Mm-hmm.
morning with, I am so glad you're here. And I think you made a great choice when you put on that pair of shoes. Or,
Perfect.
your mom did a fantastic job braiding your hair. I'm going to tell you how much I like the bow in your hair, and things like that. And then after the day gets going, I like to go down to the cafeteria when I can. I don't wear an apron. I have a lunch tool belt. And in that tool belt,
That's
oh
cool.
yeah, in the tool belt, I got scissors for opening Go-Gurts. I got straws. I got forks. I've got spoons, napkins. I've got condiments, you
That's
know.
cool.
And so, and basically what I'm doing every single time I'm around a kid with that, I'm meeting a need.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time I'm meeting a need. What do you need? I need more ketchup. I need this. I need that. I got you. I got you. And then that leads to conversations,
Yes.
and that's huge. That just, it allows you to talk about things that are beyond what's happening in the classroom. Now, your practical strategies, I highly value those. Getting to go into the classrooms, and if nothing else, just wave and say, "How you doing?" fist bump the teacher sometimes. If you fist bump the teacher, the kids are like, what? You know,
Yeah.
just moments like that where the kids get to see you as something other than the person whose office you go to when you're in trouble. Because
Real
that's not
quick,
who I
Chuck.
want to be.
Yeah, you hit it right there, but that's modeling to our students too. That fist bump, that high five, that hey, how you doing? That is modeling to our students how humans should interact with each other. And that's not always done in a positive way. So sorry to interrupt you, but
No, no,
it's
but
so
I mean,
important.
that was really kind of the gist of what I wanted to say. But just making those kind of connections, doing that modeling, but just letting kids know you value more than what they can do with a pen and pencil.
No, that's good. 40 minutes goes by quick when you're
I
when
know,
you're having
right?
fun and you're having a good conversation. So we're almost out of time here. I try to keep these right at 40 minutes. But anything else you want to share on this topic of bringing out the best in others so they can bring out the best in kids?
Well, I talked about the people who have impacted me, and then seeing Mr. Bradshaw every decade or so. And I got a note from a kid that I taught years ago, and she ended up back in the same county where I taught her. And she knew that the principal who was interviewing her had actually been my roommate when we were both teachers. And he said, "What's your philosophy of education?" And she said, "You remember Chuck Moss? That's my philosophy of education." And she told me that in a note, and she didn't know it, but I really needed that because I had just become the principal of the building for the first time. And as you know, that is a imposter syndrome kind of moment. And I was getting ready for my first faculty meeting, and I was like, yeah, and just reading that, I was like, yeah, you know what, maybe I can do this, because I
Yes.
didn't know I
Yeah.
could do that, and I did that, and so that just had a huge impact on me. And you just don't know, like people talking about when you throw a pebble in the water, you see the ripples. Yeah, but I'm a ripple from somebody else's pebble that has its own ripples,
Yes.
because somebody got me up and going so I could get other people up and going.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's so powerful, and the ripples just continue and continue. And so, two takeaways from this, Chuck. One is always know that you're a ripple and that you're causing ripples. And two, one thing that you do such a good job of, and I think we need more of it, especially on social media, especially in this world, is giving credit where credit is due. You literally have mentioned 15 names in this episode of people that have made an impact on you and have made you a better educator, leader, principal, whatever. You gave them credit. And I think so many times we just go on to the next thing and we don't slow down and say thank you. And so I encourage you to, if you're not doing this, start doing this more, giving the shout outs where shout outs are due, and go another step farther and grab your phone and take 10. You say this a lot on your messages. Grab 10, 15, takes 10, 15 seconds, send them a text and say thank you. I am where I am today because of you. Thank you for this. Because just like you needed it in that first week as a principal, they might be going through something you have no idea about, and they need that positive affirmation or that message from you. So very cool. Last thing before we wrap it up is advice that you give to educators, Chuck. You've been in a lot of different roles, a lot of leadership roles. What advice do you give to all educators?
This is going to sound kind of trite, but here we go. At least one day a week, go home on time. At least one day a week, just
One
go
day.
home on time.
That's good.
And you don't have to say on Monday, it's going to be today, but, at some point, just be willing to push away from your desk and head home, because your desk belongs to the school system, your home belongs to you.
Perfect.
And,
That is good.
just take care of yourself so you can better take care of the people who need you.
Really good. And then the second one is, what advice do you always give to students?
Every decision either puts you closer to a goal or farther from it.
Hmm.
What did today's decisions do? And we talk about goal setting, and I even told one guy, I said, "What's the goal for the end of the day?" This is an eighth grader. He said, "I just want to get out of this place." I said, "Okay." I said, "But what you're going to do is going to get you after school detention. So, did your actions bring you closer to your goal or farther from it?" And he goes, "Well, it took me farther from it." So every day when I saw him after that, I'd look at him and say, "How close are you to going home?" He goes, 310, man, 310. And that
Yeah,
just became our connection.
connection.
Just because I was like, because in his life, so many people said to him, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Nope. What do you want to be at 5 o'clock this afternoon? What
Yeah,
is your goal? And are you getting closer to it or farther away from it because of your decision? And literally every decision does that. Every decision you make puts you closer to your goal or farther from it.
that's really good. I think our society, our education system is really guilty of that. We just make these huge, lofty life goals, right? In eighth grade, you got to tell me what you're going to do for the rest of your life. No, what are you going to do this week? What are you going to do by the end of this year? We just got to bring these down and make goals that are attainable, that are reachable, and that our kids can see the finish line for. So, Chuck, I knew this was going to be a good episode. I knew this was going to be a great conversation. You're the real deal, man. Thank you again for taking the time to talk and share your wisdom with the education world. I know you share a lot, but I know your voice and your message is going to reach a lot of new listeners, a lot of new people through this podcast. So thank you for doing that. I always got to end
Thank
with a
you
shout
for
out to
inviting
School
me.
Life. Go ahead. Yeah, you're
I was
welcome.
going to say thank you for inviting me. It's been a while since I've done a podcast, and I really enjoyed our conversation, man.
Good. Thank you. Yeah. You've been on my list for a while. It's like, I gotta get a hold of Chuck. Gotta get a hold of Chuck. I gotta get him on the podcast. So thank you. What I was going to say, we've got to give a shout out to School Life for sponsoring the School Life series. Couldn't do it without the support. Thankful for that. And Chuck, before we get off here, I want you to share your social media information so our listeners can at least follow you, not reach out, talk to you, and get in contact.
Well, on just about every platform I can think of, Chuck Moss EDU. And it is phonetically just like it sounds. Chuck Moss EDU. And I'm pretty much wherever. I primarily have been using X, but with trends and the blue, just some different things.
Yeah.
But that's where you can find me. If anybody needs to get in touch with me and can't find me that way, let Ross know and we can get hooked up.
I'll hook you up. Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Chuck. Thank you to our listeners for listening to this episode. If there's, like I mentioned in the intro, if there's somebody you want to see on the School Life series, if there's a topic you want covered, reach out, let me know. We'll make sure to make it happen. But until the next episode, continue to be great today.